Influencing is the second part. What does it mean to be a change agent? I believe that leaders are fundamentally change agents inside of systems. We alter and change things. If everything is exactly the same 6 months after you arrived as it was when you first showed up as a leader, either everything was already perfect, and I've never seen perfection anywhere ever, or you're not doing a great job because you should be changing things in 6 months to make stuff better. Now, I could edge case that, but let's just broadly say you're there to change things for the better. You're going to have an effect on where people are headed if you're doing your job. And you cannot lead if you can't drive those changes. And this is interesting because it doesn't matter how right you are. No matter how many proper things you analyze and assess and figure out, no matter how many of the problems of the organization you can point to and list out and tell other people, if you can't drive change around that, it doesn't matter. This was a huge lesson for me because early on I was really good at observation and assessment. I still lean on those, but now it has to be through that lens of, okay, cool, here's what's observed, here's what I assess. I can't just leave that on the floor. I have to take that somewhere, and I have to take it to leaders, to other leaders and myself. I have to drive change there. I have to cause things to get better over time. That is what leaders do. So again, we started by knowing the goal. You now need to engage in this influencing piece. You give that goal meaning, and you make it something people will choose to move towards. And all of your varied skills are going to be put to work. Your soft skills, your hard skills, everything. And it's going to be focused on shifting the organization to maximize the chance of reaching the goal. That's what you're doing over and over and over. You do that not just for yourself, but you drive positive change. You also allow positive change to happen. You're watching other people, those underneath you, those around you, structurally in the organization, like in the hierarchy. You're watching them and you're allowing them to make positive changes too. So this is core thing leaders do. Influence others towards a goal. We're talking about influence here. Why do we fail to influence well in game dev? Okay, one of the big things I think when I've engaged with leaders, they don't even realize that influence is a core thing that's part of being a leader. That idea that you influence to create positive change is that's a key thing that leaders do. They don't know that. They think, again, that conflict or that misunderstanding of management and leadership, they think they're there to manage things. They think they're there to just improve a system or make sure everything keeps running. No, you're there to drive positive change. But if you don't know that, you won't do it. And so you will just end up being a manager who doesn't actually make anything better or not meaningfully better over time. Second reason leaders fail to influence well in game dev. You never realized you were a leader at all. You didn't realize that because maybe you didn't have the title. Again, could be the confusion of management and leadership, but this is often somebody who's just more senior and has experience and people look up to. They don't realize the influence they have and how they could be using that for good. So they just kind of ignore that part. They keep doing good work on their own. I'm not saying that's wrong, but there's also this space that opens up when you realize, holy cow, I could have a positive impact on this organization. Let me go do that. And then another one, a big one, another reason people don't influence well in game dev. Influencing and changing things can be viewed as rocking the boat. And depending on your environment, that can be seen as a career limiter. And that can be because of politics, where people aren't going to like the fact that you're changing things and they're going to push back against you, and maybe they have more political power and maybe you'll get demoted or your influence will be hamstrung or you'll get punished in some way or fired or something bad will happen. So it can be like a political thing, or it could be just stress. Driving change is hard. It is stressful. It takes effort and time, and it doesn't always work, and it will always be harder than you wish it was, and that can be stressful. It can break you down, and leaders need to be up for that stress. If you can't handle that, then don't take a leadership role, because again, this is fundamental to what you do. You influence others towards the goal. You need to be able to drive change. I'm going to talk about a time for myself where I failed pretty badly at this, and this was in the early days when I was on the Summoner's Rift Update project. That was, over 10 years ago now. But when I first showed up to the environment art team that was doing that work, I did a lot to undercut my own influence. I was very new to game development, and I was very open about how little I knew. And I was constantly telling people, I don't really know what I'm doing, but blah, blah, blah. And then I'd have a suggestion. They'd all ignore it because I was constantly telling them I didn't know what I was doing. What I actually discovered, I was pretty good at identifying the problems that were in the leadership and production space, because even though there were a lot of people who had a lot more game dev experience than me on that team, most of them didn't view it through a production lens, and the production lens is a unique craft that I was practicing, getting better at, studying, getting mentored around, and trying to figure out how to do the best within. So I was really great actually at identifying some problems. Not perfect. It's still very early in my career. I'm not perfect at it now. But I wouldn't resolve any of them. And part of that was because nobody trusted me to actually drive change because I'd spent the last 6 months telling them I didn't know what I was doing. I kind of acted as though I was an observer of the system without any real responsibility for improving it, rather than an actual part of it that could drive change from within. So while I was great at seeing the system, understanding it, I didn't improve it. I was terrible at improving it. And I acted like my job stopped at that. I could just tell everybody, like, look, here's all the problems. And then they were supposed to just know what to do with that. My actual job as a producer on that team was to fix and improve things, to increase our chances of succeeding, to improve our effectiveness so we could succeed more rapidly, all these things. By the way, I want to note here, I talked about humility earlier. I was not being humble when I was doing that, like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing and all that self-deprecation. I was just being self-deprecating and probably suffering from low self-esteem. That's not humility. My ego was very much involved. I was worried that people would expect more of me than I could provide, and I was actually very concerned about my reputation. I was focused on myself, even as I was beating myself up and undermining my own authority. So how do we start influencing? Maybe you're in a situation where you've realized you can see the problems, right? You know the goal. You can see the problems that are in the way of getting there, but you haven't really started influencing the organization. First thing here, avoid cynicism. You have to be able to avoid the cynicism and the bitterness that can pop up because changing things is hard. You get blocked by random people and systems and things, and it can just feel like you have no power, no authority, no ability to actually drive any change. And many people sort of retreat into that and they just go like, there's nothing I can do. This system is busted. This organization's stupid, blah, blah, blah. It's all never going to work, but what can I do? There's nothing I can do. I'm going to tell you something. I think it's true. You can change more than you know. But the bitterness and the cynicism won't help you do that. You can change more than you know. It may not be everything, and it may not be all at once. But what I want you to do is focus on what you can change. So maybe you see problems, you're in a studio that has 10 teams in it, and they're all in different spaces, 2 groups of 5 teams, and you're on one of those teams. Well, you see studio level problems, you might not have the influence to change that yet. But maybe on your own team, you can make things better. And maybe if you make things better on your own team, you can ladder that up to that group of 5 teams that you're a part of. Maybe you can talk to those leaders about how you think things could be improved, even if it's just for your team. You have the ability to start influencing. Just because you can't get the whole company pointed in a new direction in a short space of time doesn't mean you are powerless. Focus on what you can change. Second thing, in how to start influencing. Build your relationships with others. So first, we avoid the cynicism and the bitterness. Second, we build your relationships with others. These could be small groups of peers. I recommend starting there, actually. Talk to the leaders right around you, the other producers. If you're a producer, if you're an art lead, talk to the art leads. If you're an engineer, like an engineering lead or a senior engineer, talk to the tech leads and the engineering managers. Talk with your peers first. Start building a relationship with them. And I don't mean you want to become best buds with everybody. That's not the point here. But you want to develop effective working relationships where there's mutual trust, that we are collectively trying to get to a goal, and I have the interests of everybody in mind as I try to get there. And if you come through as genuine in that, hopefully because you are genuine in that, you will start developing relationships with people. You'll also discover ways that you can help them and they can help you, and you'll find that surprising and strange, but then you'll do it, and then that'll build the trust and strengthen the relationship. It's much more impactful when a group of people come to a senior leader and say, hey, we think this thing is busted and we have an idea to fix it, than when one person does. And if you've built relationships, you're more likely to be able to recruit others to help out. After you've gone to a small group of peers around you, start talking to key leaders. Who's your boss? Who are the stakeholders, directors, managers? Engage with them. Leadership isn't all about those underneath you structurally. They're not just about those you lead. They are also, like when I talk about influencing others towards a goal, others means everybody. You lead those above, you lead those below in the structure. And so you need to start developing relationships, because without relationships, they are less likely to trust you and follow your ideas. We all like to think that if we're right and we have the best arguments, that'll get everything through. It won't. But if you have a good relationship with somebody, sometimes even if you don't have a great argument, they'll listen to you. Even if you're just going off your gut, they'll listen to you because they trust you. Now, Some people see this and they go, oh, you're manipulating people. You're playing politics. You know, I'm not going to deny the charge. Some of this is political. Some of this is, yes, I'm developing relationships so that I can be more effective at helping the team go where it's trying to go. And, you know, sure, that can be misguided and that can go south. But the alternative is to just not do that, to not engage with this, because I don't ever want to be accused of manipulating anybody or being in politics. Influencing people and manipulating people are not the same thing. When you're manipulating people, you're trying to selfishly get something you want. When you're influencing people, there's a goal you're trying to reach that you think is a good goal for everybody, and you want to help them get there. You might be wrong, and sometimes you will be. But just because you're trying to influence people doesn't mean you're some political animal that needs to be rooted out of the organization. Don't take us, you know, if you're one of those people that just says, I never want to get involved in politics, I would say the same thing as I said earlier, then don't become a leader. Leaders have to engage to some extent in politics. So start building those relationships, peers, managers, leaders, stakeholders. It's going to help you influence. Third thing, develop courage. So we avoid cynicism and bitterness. We build the relationships. And then we develop courage. Leaders will need courage to confront the anti-patterns that exist around them, to call out the things that are broken, to say, like, this isn't working right. I think we could do better. You have to be willing to say that out loud, and that's going to be saying the wrong thing to some people. And you have to look past that and still go do it anyway for the higher chance of reaching the goal for the whole organization. You have to put yourself in the back seat a little bit. If you're all about self-preservation, leadership's not a good role for you. Because I'm going to be honest with you, when you go and develop courage and start pointing out the problems and start trying to influence positive change, a lot of people might get behind you and be really excited and think that that's great. Some people might think that that's really bad as you undermine the system that they're used to operating in. And it can be dangerous in some orgs. But just because it's dangerous doesn't mean you get a pass. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Now, I'm also not saying go die on every hill and stubbornly, walk up to the CEO and tell him why he's an idiot and how he should change things. Diplomacy matters here. Courage and diplomacy will go together very well. If you can learn how to, and again, people are like, this is all politics. Yes, welcome to leadership. You are influencing other people towards the goal. This is what you do. And if you're not comfortable with this, you should not be a leader. But you want to do this. You want to do this with a strong moral frame. You don't want to become, Machiavellian in this. But you are trying to help. You're trying to help your team. You're trying to make a great game that players love. You're trying to help that CEO that you could go to and talk to and say, like, hey, this is what I think could improve things. A lot of this is like learning good framing. Like a lot of diplomacy is learning good framing and how to talk about these things. You need to develop those skills because they're going to help you as you grow as a leader. I was early on in my career someone who hated all of this. I was like, no, I hate politics and never want to get involved. But it limited how much I was able to support my team, how much I was able to help make a great game that players would love, how much I was able to help the organization improve. And what I discovered over time is that you can be part of you can't not be part of politics. And two, since you're going to be a part of it, whether you want it or not, you might as well figure out how to get proficient at operating in that system for the good of everybody. And I'm not saying there's not danger here of going down a Machiavellian road, which is a road where you use people to your own ends. But I think running in the other direction, you just end up in another ditch. You just end up in the opposite ditch with an inability to drive influence. So yes, it's dangerous. Courage is going to help. Diplomacy is going to help. Combine those things. You might be surprised at how much influence you can drive, especially if you've managed to avoid the bitterness and the cynicism and you've built healthy relationships.